Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Freedom to Formulate podcast. I'm your host, Dave Barbash, with Personalized Nutrients. I have a very special guest today, Dr. Chrisenia White from Fairfax, Virginia. I'm super excited to have you on. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. A little bit of a background for everyone that's watching. Dr. White is a licensed naturopathic physician. She focuses and specializes in a functional and integrative medicine approach. You are a licensed chiropractic, licensed acupuncturist, and a certified nutrition specialist. Your approach is rooted in identifying and addressing the underlying causes of illness rather than simply managing symptoms. So you were inspired by your own health journey, Dr. White, and I know you're deeply, deeply committed to creating a space where your patients feel heard, respected, and genuinely supported. Dr. White works with both children and adults, as I mentioned, and with a focus on neurodevelopmental and behavioral conditions such as autism and ADD and ADHD. Chronic GI concerns, because obviously we'll talk about the gut-brain axis relationship, and metabolic conditions such as diabetes, managing cholesterol, and also chronic pain management, which seems to be ever present today. Now, you seem to combine a lot of conventional and advanced functional lab testing in your practice, including genomic analysis, which I'm sure comes into play with when you're dealing with autism. It's a big, big role.
Yes.
Now, you've developed this personalized evidence-based practice and this evidence-based protocols that you're using, and you tend to tailor each patient's plan, personalized plan, to literally their unique biology. Now,
Correct.
I'd like to discuss maybe today of how you are honoring not only the whole person, you take a very holistic approach, but how you're going beyond the symptom management and move towards that holistic optimal health. So let's take a deeper dive into the autism side and the functional medicine and the importance of the personalized testing.
So yes, functional medicine is very important. As we know, autism is truly a spectrum. So there are no two children that are alike. Even if there are siblings, I see that there are various differences between how they interact with the world around them, as well as when we're running those functional tests, they are completely different as well. So, of course, we would hope that their pediatricians or their primary care physicians would do their due diligence to run basic labs just to make sure there's no anemias, no thyroid issues, no high cholesterol, no diabetes as it is. But once we get past that point, we do need to take it a step further and look at a lot of nutritional deficiencies. We know that a lot of times autistic children they're picky eaters. It may be to taste, it may be to texture. They're not even getting the essential building blocks to help them have proper brain development.
Wow.
So after we cross that barrier, there are other things that we look at. And over time, I've begun to notice too that maybe autism is a little bit of genetic and or the environment. And when I talk to parents, I try to explain to them that no, you did not give your child autism, but it's just how their body is starting to react to the environment based on their genomics. So when we think of our testing, I like to start with organic acid testing, especially metabolomics from Genova, because it's going to give me a little bit of an idea of their nutritional deficiencies, if they are getting enough of the building blocks, such as their amino acids, their protein, all the vitamins and minerals, and then how their body is being stressed by different things, such as those deficiencies. We're able to see little traits or certain acids that could be elevated that would suggest maybe there could be like a candida or fungal infection or mycotoxins, or they do have a little snippet there for heavy metals. And over time, I've been able to see that, yes, these children are exposed to these things. We're exposed to them, but it's how their body is responding to the things that are there. And then over time, we work with gut health if the child has deficiencies or, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, because there's usually some sort of malabsorption. And once we clear all those bases, get the nutrients in order, if they have gut infections and the microbiome is off, we address that. If there's mycotoxins infections, we take care of that. And if we need to tweak it a little bit more, I love to dive into genomics, because that right there is going to tell me from a genetic standpoint, can you deal with all this? Is this the reason why we like to say that vaccines are the ones that are causing autism? Well, that's partially true. It's how their body is reacting to that vaccine. And that helps give us a bigger picture how to support that individual on a unique basis and tailor down their plan to a smaller subset.
Yeah, and how they're dealing with the adjuvants
Yeah.
that may be in that. What about telling the listeners about your own personal health journey and what inspired you to get into medicine?
Okay, well, we'll go back to the age of 5. I always wanted to be a doctor. In my mind, I thought I would either be a pediatrician or, I said I wanted to deliver babies. But as I became older, I was into holistic medicine. My mom, my grandmother, I won't say they were the most healthiest individuals, but they used to visit health food stores. We had all the holistic medicine books. And I began to read them and say, oh, I could just go into the kitchen, use this thing, and it's going to fix this. And I thought that was very fascinating. I used that in my own personal life, but I put it in my back pocket for a professional standpoint because I wasn't aware that you could be a doctor that was professionally trained and deal with these things too. So I set out to be a conventional doctor. I was pre-med for a little bit. I worked for a couple doctors as a medical assistant. They were not happy individuals. Some of them even discouraged becoming a doctor. I'm like, I don't think I want to put all my eggs in that basket and take time to do something that people seem to be so miserable about. But I continued my education and decided I'm not doing this at all. So I took a detour and I went into the side of business, and I was working and going to school for a degree in business. I said, I'm not even going into medical. We're going to just drop that. But of course, in 2009, I got laid off with a bunch of other people with that crash. And I decided to go back into something that was healthcare related. At the time, I had a friend that was in school to be a chiropractor. And she's like, I still see you being this doctor. Come check out our school. You can play with your little herbs, is what she said. And then you can be trained with some of the conventional aspects as well. And I went ahead and I checked out the school and I fell in love with it and said, okay, I could be that doctor too. Maybe not in all 50 states, but I can have those rights as somewhat of a primary care practitioner and then still treat naturally as well. Through that journey, I had some of my own health concerns and I was pretty accurate with what was wrong with me. And I would tell the doctor, hey, this thing is here. I have this cyst here. This is, I'm not well. And they just would brush me off like, who are you? You don't know what you're talking about. You have no background. But when they would do these testing or they would do imaging, I was right on the mark with what was wrong. And I always just felt unheard. I felt that, they just put me in a lineup. I had my 7 minutes of care and they just brushed me off or gave me a prescription. And I wasn't happy with that. So I was glad to see that there was something else bigger than that allowed me the rights to be able to do this legally, depending on where I live, and have both sides of it where I can say, I won't diagnose you, but I understand the physiology. I understand the mechanisms of what's happening. I understand what they're going to tell you on the conventional side of what they want to do, and the ability to run my labs and to say, hey, we can try to fix this naturally. And then we have proof on paper so you can go back to the other side and say, listen, I'm better now.
Yeah, and you've shown them the blueprint,
Yes,
which nobody really wanted to show you any blueprint before.
correct. Yes.
Wow, that is inspiring. Have within your own daily sort of routines, your journey, is it changed your own view on health? I mean, you had it from a early age of being around an environment where you had herbs and you had food and you had all these things at your disposable, but have you seen your own health journey evolve?
And, I'm still learning, new things come out where I'm still reading. I don't know everything. But yes, I know I have my moments just like everybody. I'm human. So sometimes I'm not being the best. If I'm on vacation, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, but I will notice right away if something is supposed to be done or not done. I feel when I'm falling off. And I preach that. Everything that's around me, not even just myself, just family members that have gone through certain things, it helps me tailor my approach to educate people on, you know, this is the best approach.
That's awesome. You mentioned before about the importance of testing, and you mentioned Genova as one of the examples. And I know at Freedom to Formulate and Personalize Nutrients, we have an integration with Genova. Maybe speak to the audience about the importance of a personalized testing approach. We explained a little bit so far about that, but very specifically, on the autistic side, you mentioned about testing for the microbiome, testing for heavy metals, testing for that. But on the supplement side of it, what's the benefit of, do you see from what we do, is there an alignment with your practice? Because obviously you see the ability to maybe personalize the testing and maybe match it up with a personalized supplement approach. How beneficial on having personalized supplementation available for the patient, how beneficial is that for the autistic community especially for the children, adults, or even parents that are involved in this?
So it's very important to speak on the personalized testing. It helps us narrow down. I feel that you waste a lot of time, energy, and money just throwing the whole kitchen sink. If we just say, oh, we have constipation, for example, well, there's so many different herbs that you can use for constipation, but the why behind your constipation is going to be more efficient. So instead of just having the bowels move, if you have gut overgrowth, so we look at methane gases, a lot of times creates constipation. If you have high
Mhm.
methane gases, you want to treat the bacteria that's creating the methane gases that would subsequently treat the constipation versus just giving you laxatives. With
Right.
taking whatever information we're getting on those tests and shifting it over to something like a personalized nutrients, it's really important for everybody, including the parents. But when I look at my little kids, we have picky eaters. They don't like to take, they can't take supplements, so they can't swallow things. Sometimes when you're combining a lot of different vitamins and minerals, the taste gets really off. But how beautiful it is to be able to say, well, you just need these 12 vitamins or minerals or this herb and putting it into one thing to reduce the overload on that child. We want to look at safety first. And that's what's
Right.
important to me. Or I'll see a lot of parents are coming in on products like ANRC, or we put them on things like Mitocore, and those are great products. I like the blends. But when we're running some of the metabolomics, they're not quite hitting the areas that need to be worked on. And then we see some markers that are elevated, such as like, I see a lot of times lithium off the charts. And it's like, but that particular individual doesn't even need lithium, but we're giving them a high dosage of this vitamin to get everything else. Well, now I can create something that takes away all this excess crap and just
Exactly.
give them exactly what they need. And it may be better tasting, or they may just, their body's smart enough to know that I don't want to take that because I don't need half the other stuff that's in there versus it being a tasting.
That's true. Yeah, I see that with a bunch of practitioners where they'll labs and this child the antimony levels are here,
Yeah.
or these selenium levels are quite elevated, and so then they can go in and then personalize it, and then iodine will bring down this, and
Yeah.
B and vitamins and vitamin C will bring down this. Uh, what are some of the other things besides that you think are some of the most important things that parents need to be aware of as contributing factors in the environment or maybe diet, that maybe they can make some adjustments on when it comes to autism?
Yeah. So the bigger key is diet. I understand that, most children on spectrum have the picky eating, but gluten and dairy are really huge. That's not going to be 100% for most parents, but a lot of parents, even before they see me, they've already heard of cutting out gluten and dairy, and it's made a difference with behavior, sleep, sometimes verbal speech. Another one is going to be processed sugars. So, all the
Yeah.
cookies and candies and the sweets are going to create an issue. Blood sugar spikes can create aggression and fatigue and irritability. So, definitely cutting out those three things are key pieces in regulating brain. As for environment, if you have water damage to your property, you definitely want to check that
Mm,
out because that's
definitely.
huge for the mycotoxins. And as I mentioned, just because everybody lives in that environment and we have one or two children that have autism, it's how their body is reacting to the mold versus the family as a collective, even though we know that
Mm.
everybody can have negative effects from mycotoxins. So exposures that you have control over, organic foods, no pesticides, clean eating, no GMOs, just clean up the environment that you have control over.
And as parents get more educated, you start to see these shifts, and I'm sure their eyes sort of open up, and they tend to probably be more receptive because now they start to see some of these changes.
Yeah, when there's changes there, definitely receptive. Sometimes depending on, we have some groups that are out there that, they clean together to educate one another, but sometimes they miss the mark where they still feel that their child is just like every other child that's out there. And the more educated they become, sometimes it becomes overwhelming, but I have to educate that this is still a child too. That yes, I want you to get rid of certain key foods, but if your child only eats three foods and now someone is telling you to take away this one thing and we need that one thing to pad a nutrient, you know, like they're still a child. That's going to be stressful on the child too. So some are receptive, some are like, we can be better, we can do more, and they're doing way too much that can create harm. to the child.
Yeah, and I think also there's a point where do you take away that child's it has to have some sense of fun and enjoyment to
Right,
not strip it away. And you can make it fun and enjoyable, but you hope that they're not too overbearing, right?
right. Yeah.
Uh, when it comes to protocols, are you seeing more some consistent protocols that you use in your practice? You mentioned focusing obviously on things like GI and heavy metal detox and basic foundational stuff like fatty acids and so forth
Yeah.
and vitamin mineral deficiency. Maybe go into some of the protocols that you know, prefer to use in your practice. And obviously it's going to be individualized for the individual. Mm.
A protocol base is foundational testing. And once again, that's going to be organic acids, whether they come in with a report or we're running one, and then looking at what's there. And sometimes I have people that come in and they've heard we have to run these tests. And I'm like, no, I'm going to look at your child as an individual. It can get pretty pricey. And I understand if you want to pay for it, that's fine. But looking at where the most need is, and that's the beauty of an organic acid, is how bad is the
Um,
gut microbiome? How bad is the essential fatty acids? How bad is oxidative stress? To start that plan. But in that first visit, before we get testing, it's going to be that dietary guideline here. Let's take some of these things out. Let's maybe try to add some of these things that we know can increase butyrate, for example, to help with gut microbiome. If, we have a child that is aggressive, maybe we will go ahead and throw in something that can help with some of those neurotransmitters right out the gate while we're waiting. Once I get those results back, nutrition. So we're going to, especially with the picky eaters, we're going to have to go in and start giving the building blocks and the foundation. And at that same time, if it's, we're going to always work on gut health no matter what. But if there's a
mhm.
lot of, microbiome issues, or we opted to do a stool test right out the gate, heavy gut work, because leaky gut creates a leaky brain that can create brain inflammation. I don't like to go into heavy detoxing of metals and mold right away if we know the gut is leaky, because once you start pouring
You're
that out,
looking at
it's going to
tight
pass through the
junctions and
barrier. It's going to go
exactly.
right back up to the brain. So once we're clearing foundation and then clearing fixing the gut microbiome, yes, I will give things that naturally support detoxification, but I'm not going to pull heavy amounts out. When those things are cleared, then we go into the heavy work of
Work on the foundational first. Yeah, yeah, exactly
let's
right.
go into a little bit of a heavy detox to try to get out the metals, let's try to get out the molds. And I am always encouraging at that point in time, let's go ahead and try to get genomics if it's in the budget, just because that is their makeup. That is the true foundation. Because if they have a mutation on one of the genes that supports heavy metal detoxification, yet we're constantly,
Mm,
saying, why aren't these metals clearing? Well, maybe you just need to support the genomics and upregulate or downregulate a gene and have a specific thing that's been scientifically researched to support that gene to help you on your journey, and know that they may need to be on this one thing indefinitely because we're protecting against the environment. Then we can clear that heavy metal toxicity, and then maybe we don't have a reoccurrence based on
yeah,
that.
currents and
I'm
circulation. Yeah.
constantly tweaking and looking at, like, okay, well, what's going on here? But foundation is nutrients, environmental lifestyle, and gut health.
That's really great. I know one of the new ingredients we got in the tributyrin, which it's short chain fatty acids, butyric acid, and we see a lot, I'd say almost 100% of gut test patients' results come back deficiency in that. You think you mentioned about obviously importance of organic or at least pesticide free produce or fruits and veggies. Glyphosate, I know having grown up in England, but then growing up in Florida, when I moved to the States, you could eat a piece of, from a bakery growing up in England, or especially when you go to mainstream Europe, like south of France, southern Italy, southern Spain, and then you eat the same sort of baguette in America, this glyphosate is just causing havoc. So do you think parents are becoming more aware of maybe reading food labels and looking at maybe seed oils as, maybe they didn't look at what they were using to cook and maybe being part of that inflammatory process, they were adding fuel to the fire without realizing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say there's a 50-50 there, because I know we've talked outside of this podcast that I have a group that's they're heavily researching and they're discussing things amongst each other. And that particular group is where a lot of my referrals come from. they're more in the know, especially if they've been in this group for a while where they're reading labels. They are sometimes, because I'm human, they'll catch things that I don't catch at times and be like, hey, what about this? And I'm like, I think it's great. But there is another side of individuals that they're not in those groups. And so they're not aware. So they may come in and they're just like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. They're not understanding yet. So it's my job to educate. So it's a beauty when you have one side that comes in and they already have met the mark of getting rid of all these things. And we have the other folks that don't know.
Yeah, and also I think the basics as well. Even if somebody can't afford necessarily to go 100% organic, and in knowing the clean 15 and the dirty dozen, and maybe taking some incremental steps this way.
Oh,
What I have to applaud you is the fact that, when I grew up in England as a kid, I had a conventional doctor, and, I didn't have a holistic doctor. But now, I've got an MP that literally provides me the deep dive testing at 60 years old that I am now. It would have been amazing to be a child and to have at your disposal all this deeper dive testing to give you the blueprint. Back in the 70s when I grew up, standard labs, less of a deeper dive. But
yeah.
nowadays, with autism, 1 out of every 32, and they project probably in the next 25 years, it could be 1 out of every 5 or 6. So what you're doing, I think, holistic approach, I have to applaud. And we thank you for taking time out of your day and to sharing your wisdom for the people that are watching this podcast today. So looking
Thank you.
forward to maybe next time we can do maybe a segmented another topic for the autistic community. And hope you have a wonderful
Thank you.
rest of your day. We
You
appreciate
too.
it.
Thank you.